Have you ever wondered when humans first started talking about kindness, not just in families or small groups, but as a rule for an entire empire? When did a ruler decide that compassion was more powerful than conquest? Today, we're journeying back over 2,000 years to ancient India, to uncover the story of a king who transformed himself from a ruthless warrior into a messenger of peace. This is the story of Ashoka the Great and his incredible edicts, stone pillars that carried the first widespread message of compassion in human history. Imagine a vast empire stretching across most of the Indian subcontinent. It's the 3rd century BCE and the Mauryan Empire is at its peak. At its helm is Emperor Ashoka, a man known for his ambition and military might. Early in his reign, Ashoka was every bit the conqueror his ancestors were. He expanded his territory aggressively, believing that power grew from the tip of a sword. But one brutal campaign would change everything. This was the Kalinga War. Kalinga, a prosperous state on the eastern coast of India, was one of the few regions that remained independent. Ashoka, determined to bring it under his control, launched a massive invasion. The war was horrific. Ancient texts describe a scene of unimaginable devastation. Over 100,000 people were killed, and even more were captured and deported. The rivers ran red, and the land was littered with the dead and dying. When Ashoka walked through the battlefield after his victory, he wasn't filled with pride. He was filled with profound remorse. The sight of so much suffering, the cries of the widows and orphans, shattered him. This wasn't the glory he had imagined. This was a nightmare. It was in this moment of deep personal crisis that Ashoka's transformation began. He renounced violence and embraced a new philosophy. A new way of life centered on Dharma, a concept that in his context meant moral virtue, righteousness, and social responsibility. But how do you communicate such a radical change of heart to an entire empire? How do you govern with compassion instead of fear? Ashoka's solution was ingenious and unprecedented. He decided to speak directly to his people, not through messengers or decrees that could be forgotten, but through inscriptions carved into stone. These are what we now call the Edicts of Ashoka. He had these messages inscribed on massive stone pillars and large rock faces, placing them at strategic locations throughout his empire along trade routes, in major cities, and at pilgrimage sites. These weren't just monuments. They were public service announcements from antiquity meant to be read aloud to the largely illiterate population. They were written in local scripts like Brahmi and Kharosthi, and in local dialects like Prakrit, so everyone could understand. In some border regions, they were even translated into Greek and Aramaic. This was a ruler who genuinely wanted his message to be heard by all. So, what did these edicts actually say? They are some of the most moving and progressive political statements you'll ever read. Ashoka begins many of them by referring to himself as Devanam Piya Piyadasi, which means beloved of the gods, he who looks on with affection. This name itself signals a shift from a fearsome emperor to a benevolent, fatherly figure. In his edicts, Ashoka outlines his new policy of Dharma. He speaks of nonviolence not just towards humans but towards all living beings. One edict famously declares a ban on animal sacrifice and restricts the slaughter of animals for the royal kitchen. Think about that for a moment. An emperor, in an age of constant warfare and ritual sacrifice, was advocating for animal rights. He even established what might be the world's first veterinary hospitals and planted fruit trees and medicinal herbs along roads for the benefit of both people and animals. He also emphasized religious tolerance. The Mauryan Empire was a melting pot of different beliefs: Buddhism, Jainism, Brahmanism, and many other local traditions. Ashoka, who had personally converted to Buddhism, didn't force his faith on anyone. Instead, his edicts call for respect among all sects. One rock edict explicitly states that one should not honor only one's own religion and criticize others. Instead, one should honor other religions for whatever reason they are worthy of honor. By doing so, you strengthen your own religion and help others. This was a revolutionary plea for interfaith harmony, thousands of years before the concept became a global ideal. Ashoka's vision of a just society also extended to social welfare. His edicts talk about his efforts to provide for his people. He ordered the digging of wells, the construction of rest houses for travelers, and the provision of medical care for everyone. He appointed special officials called the Dharma Mahamatras, whose job was to travel the empire and ensure that people were being treated fairly and that his principles of Dharma were being upheld. They were tasked with looking after the welfare of all people, including the poor, the elderly, and even prisoners. Ashoka believed that a ruler's duty was not to conquer, but to serve. His goal, as he stated, was the welfare and happiness of all beings. Perhaps the most powerful part of the edicts is Ashoka's personal reflection and his honesty. He openly admits his past mistakes, particularly the horrors of the Kalinga War. In Rock Edict 13, he describes his remorse in vivid detail. He speaks of the slaughter, death, and deportation that weighed heavily on his mind. He declares that the only true conquest is the conquest by Dharma, the conquest of hearts through love and morality. He renounces military aggression, vowing that he will now only pursue spiritual victory. This is an incredible historical document. How many rulers, ancient or modern, have publicly confessed their wrongdoing and pledged to change their ways so completely? Ashoka wasn't just creating laws. He was sharing his personal journey of transformation, hoping to inspire his subjects to follow a similar path of kindness and self-control. The legacy of Ashoka's edicts is immense. For centuries, these pillars and rocks stood as silent witnesses to a different kind of power, the power of compassion. Over time, as the empire fell and languages changed, the script became unreadable and the meaning of the edicts was lost. For nearly 2,000 years, Ashoka was just a name in ancient king lists. It wasn't until the 1830s that a brilliant British scholar and archaeologist named James Prinsep finally deciphered the Brahmi script. Suddenly, these ancient stones began to speak again. The voice of Ashoka, the beloved of the gods, echoed across the millennia, revealing a philosophy of governance so advanced and humane that it still feels relevant today. The discovery of the edicts completely reshaped our understanding of ancient Indian history and presented the world with a model of an enlightened ruler. Ashoka's principles of nonviolence and respect for life deeply influenced the course of Buddhism, helping it spread from a local sect to a world religion. His emphasis on peace and tolerance has inspired leaders for generations, including Mahatma Gandhi and India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, who adopted the Ashokan lion capital as the national emblem of modern India. The wheel in the center of the Indian flag, the Ashoka Chakra, is taken directly from these pillars, symbolizing the eternal wheel of Dharma. So the next time you see the Indian flag, remember the story behind that wheel. It's not just a symbol. It's a reminder of a king who, over 2 millennia ago, had a profound change of heart. A king who chose mercy over might, and who used his immense power to spread a message of compassion, tolerance, and peace. Ashoka's edicts are more than just historical artifacts. They are a timeless testament to the idea that true greatness lies not in how many you conquer, but in how many you serve, and that the most powerful voice in history might just be the one that speaks for kindness. Thanks for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as inspiring as I do, please hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the fascinating corners of our shared history. Let me know in the comments which historical figure's hidden story you'd like to explore next. See you in the next video.